Welcome to another episode of Talk Time with MaxContact. I'm your host, Sean McIver. In today's episode, we welcome Nathan Dring, founder and director of Nathan Dring and Associates Limited. With a rich history in organisational transformation across various sectors, Nathan's a master of using dialogue to drive change. His strategies improve productivity and foster a collaborative atmosphere in workplaces. Today, I'm going to be drilling into how best to integrate learning into daily operations and use conversations as a tool for building trust and enhancing team dynamics. Welcome, Nathan. I never like to do the full introduction when you're right here with me. So how did I do?
You did very well. I think, and you saved me having the awkwardness of having to talk about myself in that way, because that always feels a bit weird. So that's fine with me.
Excellent. So we'll dive straight in. I'm going to kick things off. I was thinking ahead of this conversation, Nathan. I remember when I was on the phones, and it was a long time ago. I was a frontline agent on the phones, and it was a case of everybody needs to log out. We've got to go and do training on X. You go into a room, you sit down and you talk to for half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever the case may be, and you leave the room, you go back on the phones and pretty much immediately forget everything you've just been told. Maybe that's on me, but that was kind of the habit. Obviously, times change, we've moved on from that. However, I do have a question, how big of a problem do you see that still being when we look at the industry as a whole today?
I think there are definitely challenges with that. Number one, I don't think you're alone. So there's a chap called Ebbinghaus who talks about the forgetting curve and how we hear a piece of information, then it drops off. And I think the reckon one, and I'm sure it's not an exact science, but it's something like about you retain about 11% of what you remember. And I think that then compounds the problem, because you've already made an operational sacrifice by taking people, away into a room, and then they come back and they don't really remember much from it. So then the perception is that hasn't really worked, either for the agent or for the operation generally. So then next time you're trying to persuade somebody that this is the good investment of time and money, you're up against it. Well, it didn't work last time. So I think there's the perception of it as being a not particularly helpful thing, which I would echo. I think also that the assumption that human beings can just retain information when it's spoken at them is wildly wrong. So there's the bit of the brain, the hippocampus, where I can remember 7 minutes of spoken information at me. After that, it's just like, it's like filling up my coffee cup out of a bucket. There comes to a point when the cup can only hold so much and everything else is wasted. And I think that approach to training and a passive push of information isn't that helpful. There are technologies that I think can help, but I'm firmly believing that if you want to change how people think, feel, say, do, it's rooted in the conversations you have with them. So I've got kids, 11 and 7, and there's oftentimes I want them to change their behavior. I have yet to take them into a separate room and step them through some PowerPoints and training, and then bring them back and point to the metrics that will now get better as a result of that half an hour. We just have a series of conversations about what's going well, what we liked, what we didn't do, what we need to do more of. And we know that works in so many aspects of our life generally, and yet somehow we sort of suspend that logic in order to do training in the contact center space and in wider industries generally, I'd say.
On the back of that then, given your experience in transforming team dynamics and cultural shifts and so on, how do you recommend contact centers integrate continuous learning into daily operations without having to pull agents away from those important primary responsibilities such as call taking? If you've got like a specific example, that'd be great.
I think one of the things that's great about contact centers is they are scheduled as an operation and as a way of working almost more than any other function. The marketing team don't have fixed times, and you're told when you can go on your break and who you can sit with and when you can go to the toilet and that sort of stuff. And I appreciate there's more autonomy and flexibility coming in some sites, but the fact that there is a routine and cadence of conversations in contact centers, and that's a brilliant foundation, because you can then what you're seeking to do is, okay, if we can put something better into the content of those conversations, we can drive some better outcomes. It's like the daily huddle, and you might remember this from being an agent. The daily huddle got 20 minutes built into the shrink model to have it. The team leader will stand up with yesterday's figures, which now none of us can affect, and walk us through them. So there's probably 2 or 3 people who feel slightly aggrieved by that because they know it's their fault and they feel like they're being victimized. There's a couple of people thinking, if I just don't contribute, I can have a longer cigarette break. And then there's just a couple of other people looking out the window. Within about 3 minutes of the 15, 20, we've wound up. Team leader doesn't quite know what else to say. And so, well, let's just have a longer break or get back on the phones. And part of the planned time for healthy development through conversation is wasted. So the work I do with clients is to say, well, let's use that cadence of conversation to talk about something that really, really matters. So if we want to talk, if we know that actually our challenge on our site is we are siloed, this team won't talk to this team, won't talk to this time. Okay, well, let's have a conversations about collaboration. Because if I talk about it and I think about it more and I change how I feel about it, then guess what? I change how I act towards it, and subsequently my behavior shifts. So a lot of what I do is seeding conversations in the routines that exist. And I think to kind of jump back to the previous question about training, my old boss used to use the phrase, things that are baked in, not bolted on. And as soon as something's bolted on, it's not the day job. So, okay, so now you join training, but that's not my day job. I've got enough pressures of my day job as it is. And now you want me to do more. So instead of bolting on, let's bake it in. Because again, when you come under the cosh, when calls are queuing, when something's gone wrong, when there's attrition or whatever it might be, the first thing that is removed is the bit that's been bolted on.
Excellent. I'm going to follow that up with a yes and, in as much as that's even, again, this is me riffing a little, but that's even more important now in a universe in which we have, for example, hybrid or remote working. Particularly within that cultural establishment and the way in which things are done. When people are remote, it's easy to fall into old habits or to not have things front and center. So presumably those sorts of changes and shifts are even more important now than they perhaps were in the old world, for want of a better phrase. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair, because I think one of the challenges we have is we've lost, if you like, the serendipitous opportunities that build trust. So that sounds like waffle. Let me explain what I mean. So on a morning, I happen to be arriving at the same bit time as you in the old school. So how's your weekend? What are you up to? What are your kids doing today? And you might drop in bits which I haven't specifically asked about, but they give me insights into you and help me understand you a little bit more. And we gradually build some trust. And I start to feel like, oh, yeah, I'm part of your tribe. The challenge with the remote thing now is so often you schedule a Zoom or you book in a Teams, and it's in for half an hour and it's got a specific agenda. And you maybe do a little bit before and after if you happen to be in the Zoom room early, but a lot of that trust building serendipitous conversation has gone. So actually, again, dialing up the importance of conversation is huge. And a baby's born. Huge release of oxytocin in both mum and baby. Oxytocin is the chemical that makes me say, I feel safe here. It's the trust chemical. You get that release when you have decent conversations with people, because you start to build trust. You think, I'm safe here. They're part of my tribe. I can let my guard down. I can be vulnerable. I can be me. Everything would say that if you want high performance, you start with trust. There's a chap called Patrick Lencioni who did a whole thing about, the dysfunctions of a team. And he says, basically, if you've not got trust, you won't get conflict. If you've not got conflict, you won't have commitment. If you've not got a commitment, you won't have accountability, and you'll never get the results. I think the challenge in contact centers is the focus is often at the top of the pyramid on the results. So as such, it's inverted and it's completely wobbly. The premise of having healthy conversations about the right stuff is it builds trust. And I think to your point around people now being sat at home remote, okay, we need to find ways to pull them back in. Conversation does that.
Excellent, amazing. Thank you for that. I guess the next logical step is to kind of me to ask you where you've successfully implemented programs that do drive that behavior change. Can you talk to me about the effectiveness of almost the micro-learning approach in terms of fostering that performance shift within the contact center teams? How do you tailor that micro-learning so that you're catering to different learning styles? I'm much more of a doing type learner than a taking on board and being told type learner.
I think one of the most successful things is it isn't predicated on the wisdom knowledge of a training team or a consultant who you somehow can't get rid of. And I know that as a consultant, right, I shouldn't say that. I want to be as sticky as possible and you can never be rid of me. No, because that you lose credibility left, right, and center. what this does is actually it puts it, the success of it is that it actually upskills team leaders and their credibility and their leadership capability, as well as doing the do. So go back to the conversation around, we want to talk about collaboration. Okay. So we're not going to go and have a training course on collaboration, because somewhere logically we all know that it works. We all get it. And if you went into a room and said, should we collaborate? Everyone say hell yes to that. But then we don't. So what you do instead then is you go, well, okay, if you and your team, through your team leader, are specifically having a conversation around this thing, collaboration, then you can work out how that takes bed in where you are. So it's not a slogan on a wall. It's not a pushed mandate. You go, okay, so us in this team, why does collaboration matter to us, and where are we good at it, and how can we be better at it, and what ideas can we share elsewhere? So the success is then, there is, if you like, the implementation is co-created within the team. And so then collaboration means something to us. It's not just, and this year's values are collaboration. Well, of course, there's always going to be collaboration, customer, and trust. That's for every organization's got those, haven't they? So the success is when I've been onto sites and I've seen 5 or 6, 7 teams all over the course of a month, 6 weeks, all talking about collaboration, all knowing what collaboration means to them, as well as how them being more collaborative can benefit the organization, but everyone's doing it in a slightly different way. So it recognizes that there are slight nuances. So if I want to say, so what would, in the contact center, what does collaboration mean for the back office planning team? Well, they know that they've got collaboration across different stakeholders and probably stakeholders outside. Fine. So collaboration means something to them. And then they work out how can they be more collaborative in their environment. Frontline service agents, well, how can you be more collaborative? Now, their initial, well, I can't because I'm just stuck on a phone. I hear a beep in my ear, pick up the call. Okay, but how might you be more collaborative within this team? How might you, when you want to go on a break, think, well, actually, there's a call queuing, I can. Okay, so it's still collaboration, but you implement it and it takes teeth and root in your team in a different way that's specific. And as such, everyone is doing the thing and behaving the way, but they've taken ownership of it to do it their way. And when you start to see that all over, you go, okay, well, that's no longer a training sheep dip. It's no longer just tapping into the salute the flag that says collaboration on it. It's, and then I get it and I live it and I do it. And you get those pockets all over, and gradually the site starts to shift and change behavior as a result.
Okay, I'm going to follow that up because you've touched on a couple of things there that I think I want to kind of draw out a little further. And you talked around the roles of the managers and the team leads in driving that culture change and performance improvement. But there's 2 points that I would like to kind of ask, or 2 sides of the same coin that I'd like to ask on the back of that. There will be pain points and areas of resistance to change in trends that you'll have seen. Number one, how do you overcome those? And number 2, is there a role that tends to either be a champion for change or conversely a real barrier to change? And how do you overcome that hurdle within the context of what we're talking around?
So there's the phrase, people don't like change. And I don't necessarily think that's right. I think people don't like being changed. So if I change you, you resist that, you push back against it. If I'm part of the change and part of designing the change and working out what it means, then I'll go with it more readily. So that's why it's really important that these things, these behavioral shifts and cultural shifts, everyone has a part of it. So it's not a top-down mandate, it's kind of a bubbling up, which I think is really key. But you only get the bubbling up if you facilitate and allow the conversations for that to come to pass. So I think you get less resistance if people feel like, yes, this was my idea. Yes, I'm part of that. And again, you see that in society. I worked with a charity who cleaned up graffiti, right, in Leeds. But they noticed that actually if people in the local community had designed the mural, it very rarely got graffitied because it's theirs now. If Leeds City Council paid for somebody to come in and design it for them, it'd be tagged left, right, and centre. So there's something about that, again, in the human side. If I own this and I've been part of creating this, I'm going to preserve, protect, and enhance it. Because the fundamentals of what we talk about, this isn't contact center people are like this. This is human beings have a certain wiring in a certain way. So let's not fight against it. Let's use that to our advantage.
Through that lens, so I'm just trying to take a moment to frame the follow-up to that. There has to be a willingness in order to want to own or be part of that. And if we look at again, if we look back to how I opened this conversation, where you're taking people into a room, if that is the approach out there right now, I guess my question comes down to what's the smallest immediate change that a company in that scenario can make to begin that process today?
I think a really nice thing people can do is seek to understand the culture that they're working in. So, as a really easy thing to do, is ask your people 2 questions. Question one, 3 words for me. How do you describe our culture today? And you'll go in word cloud it. Takes 10 minutes. And you'll see what the biggest things are that they're saying about it. Then you ask them the question, in order for you to be at your best every day, what would this culture need to be like? Give me 3 words. And then you'll get your current state and where your people need you to be. And it's their words and it's their ideas. And from there, you can start to plan and bring people in to help as much as is needed. But that's a really simple snapshot. And the beauty of that is it will bring out the emotional responses to the questions, not simply the logical, tangible metric stuff. Because the way we work, we are emotional beings. We rationalize. So, well, I bought this car because it's brilliant MPG and, it's just, I think it'd be great safety for the family. No, you sat at the lights, the leather smelt nice and it went. That's why you bought the car. We're emotional, we rationalize. And so I think if you can start to use those sorts of describe it now, describe what you want it to be, you tap into the emotional levers in people. And from that, you can get a real sense of what you're working with. Because if 80% of our behavior is driven by that stuff, we sure as hell need to know what it is.
I really like that answer. I think that from my point of view, thinking back on previous roles, even to an extent current roles, where imagining that exercise playing out, I think the results of that would be really interesting and also give a clear indication of the gulf between the two and how much of a journey there is to go on, and contextualizing that not only for the business but also for the individual when they look at what that trend emerges. How do you track that then? So I'm on the journey. I run a business. I've got 200 staff. I'm on that journey. How do I track where I'm at along that journey and whether what I'm doing is working or whether it's actually having a negative impact? What metrics? Is there one?
The big challenge when you're dealing with behavioral stuff is it is intangible and it is a lag metric. So very early on, given that you're working into a contact center, which is compliant, regulated, logical, and metric driven, and you're coming and going, but actually, the people who make this place work are emotional, irrational, intangible, and so on and so forth. But so where you start to see it is you'll see an uplift in engagement. You'll see people, if they feel like they own part of the way they work and they own part of the approach of these buzzwords, if they can see the value and that they bring, that if they know that they are seen, and they know that because they're invited to, in conversation, share what they think, then you start to get up the tick in engagement. The beauty of that is a 1% uplift in engagement generally drives roughly a 2% uplift in productivity. Now, you're not shifting your headcount, so that uplift in productivity, that's somewhere you're finding profit there. So there is a bottom line to this as well, which is great. You also start to see it in attrition. And, I think contact centers at the moment, it's just 20 plus spin in attrition. And why is that? Well, because I'm not trusted, I'm not valued, I'm not recognized, I'm a widget. I am, to all intents and purposes, a cog in a machine. And again, I'm sure people hear that. Go, no, not in my site. It's not like that where I work. But if you listen to the language of performance, it's levers, it's metrics, it's dials. That's the language of a machine, as opposed to growth and organic and roots, which is the language of an organism. And again, we're dealing with people, so we should be using a language that is about people and about growth and about living things, not hard and fast metrics. Again, people can say that's pedantry or that sounds a bit wishy-washy. There's a thing called the Florida effect. Have you ever heard of the Florida effect? Where they basically said if we spend enough time around people talking about things, this did some study in America, talking about things that are linked to being old. So moving to Florida, going to bingo, pensions, all these sorts of things. Over time, these people started walking and moving slower. They just started to act in a way as if they were at that stage of life. The Florida effect. So this is what I'm passionate about. The words we use, the conversations we have, the stories we tell matter. They absolutely matter. And we know it and we live it in our normal lives. And then we sort of hang it up with our coats at the door of the contact center and go, well, we're going to do it a different way here. And then surprise, surprise, it doesn't get us the results that we really want.
You've just triggered a couple of things in my memory, and one of those is, again, to come back to the widgets piece where people are referred to as widgets. I always remember kind of internally shrieking, screaming when I heard someone refer to a particular team as, oh yeah, they're non-revenue generating entities. That was how they were referred to, and I just remember shrieking internally, going, I can't believe that that's just been said. And on the back of that, it's the quote, and I forget off the top of my head who it was that said it, but it was, people won't remember the words that you say, they'll remember how you made them feel. And if we continually refer to people with these metrics and that sort of thing, then of course that's going to have an impact on how you feel. And so changing the words changes how you feel, so that tracks as well. I'm going to kind of bring something else in now that I'm really keen to talk to you about. You were recently a judge at the UK Employee Experience Awards, and you're about to go into judging the UK Customer Experience Awards as well. Number one, first off, congratulations. That sounds really awesome. But my question then is, what were you really impressed with at the Employee Experience Awards? What really jumped out to you as part of that process? And was there a trend there that you're starting to see? And what are you looking forward to, or what are you expecting to get from the Customer Experience Awards? And is there an alignment between those that's starting to emerge?
It was really interesting. There was quite a lot of stuff around clever tech. So what we've got clever learning platforms, we've got portals, we've got ways of bringing all your tech in together. We've got sharper ways of onboarding so it's less clumsy, that sort of stuff. And that was really good. Rarely did it win, though. The stuff that won was where people were, and again, this is kind of my slant on it, is where the people matter. So we're going to do stuff with the people. There was some phenomenal well-being stuff. There was one in a category that I judged where you knew they've been making tons of revenue, but that was secondary to them, because what they're saying, but what we're doing is the right thing for these people. And the other stuff will follow, right? But we are doing stuff because if we get it right for the people and build that as a foundation, the other stuff comes. And I think generally that was the piece that we were talking around, was because it's seeded in people. Because even the technologies or the process changes, they were saying that's all well and good. It's scoped and mapped and costed and benefits and all that. But then it hits the mark on human being, and they will decide in a moment yes or no. And so if you've not got them with you, hearts and minds, the co-creation bit, whatever that might be, then not that it doesn't matter, but it has a massive impact on the value of all the other stuff you've done. And so I think that was the bit I noticed, was that lots of clever tech, lots of really cool, really sharp stuff, some brilliant minds, and there is therefore a leaning into it. I think the risk is the digital side of things, the gamified side, the online learning, the nudges stuff, it is seen as the sexy new shiny thing. But it gaps for me in that, like we talked about earlier, I want to know I'm part of the tribe. I want to know I'm part of the team. If you want me to put in extra shifts, if you want me to come in early, if you want me to change my working from home day to be part of this, if you want me to flip over onto a new team and start working their calls, I need to feel like I'm connected to you. And I'll feel I'm connected to you if there's trust and if we understand each other and we've got a relationship. That doesn't come through me having a sexier looking e-learning portal.
Can't get through a conversation without talking about those two magic letters, AI. And I think that ties in really nicely to what we've just been talking around, in as much as the AI should be there to enhance and improve the life of the user, not just to be tacked on as you said, some new shiny thing just because it's new and shiny and we want to be using the new and shiny things. Again, just from my point of view, is that something that you would agree with? Have you seen that within the what you were judging recently?
There were aspects of AI. I think interestingly, I was at a conference earlier in the year with Piers Linney, who's one of the dragons from Dragon's Den. And he had a big view that, contact centers will be gone. They'll be gone soon. They're an irrelevant, or not irrelevant, but they'll be replaced by AI. We don't need them. AI will never do empathy. And if you think the number of times actually when someone's had a great customer experience, there's been a personal connection, and okay, you have understood and got me, not my problem, me. And that's when I want to come back. And AI cannot and will not do empathy. I don't think it'll ever get to that point. Why do I go back to a shop or a restaurant? Why do I do that even though it's a little bit more expensive? Well, because I want to go back there, because I know that when I get there, they get me. If any restaurant could serve me food, great. It's not about that. And AI, for as long as it cannot do empathy and understanding, will not get me. It'll understand my issue or my need, but not me. And I think human beings want to feel understood. I want to feel like you've got me. Now, where does that place AI? I think what it'll be able to do is a lot of the, if something like the value pyramid, it'll be able to do a lot of the bottom of the value pyramid, the transactional, functional, easy stuff. And so I think there is a requirement and a responsibility in the service industry to help people move up the value pyramid and go, okay, well, where you will be able to bring more, where you'll add more value is in this empathy, in this understanding, in this creativity, in this autonomy. But to create that environment, you've got to have leaders who know how to lead an autonomous workforce. You've got to have leaders who genuinely embrace innovation, even if you fail fast and learn. Whereas the leadership will suppress people, they'll keep them at the transactional level, and then AI can quickly replace them out. But then they won't have the skills, they won't have the people to deal with what customers really want.
Just to close us off, I think that aligns really nicely. And in my head, I'm kind of thinking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs almost. And the way in which they align that realization of kind of, sense of self, sense of value, and taking out the transactional things, utilizing some of the automation tools, elevating that and saying, actually, I matter as an employee because I'm delivering this rather than, for example, typing in numbers endlessly. It feeds into that whole, or almost a parallel to Maslow's hierarchy of needs in that sense. Again, just throwing that out there as a last thought. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'll finish with this. So my eldest brother, about 30 years ago, worked at a BT call centre in Leeds. The day he was asked to leave was the day that he was sat. He didn't realise his team leader was stood behind him, and he said to the customer, to be honest, we're all just a bunch of performing monkeys here. Doesn't matter what I think. Team leader heard, and believe it or not, he was asked to leave that day. But actually, I think all he did was vocalise what quite a lot of people feel a lot of the day. And until they feel like they're seen and they matter, and therefore what they do matters, not just making money for the shareholders, not just keeping us out of court, not just obliging, not just how the hell do I get this person to stop shouting, but I matter, and therefore what I do matters and helps. I'm shaping this team, I'm shaping this department, I'm for the good of this business, and I can contribute. And what I do, if I have a great day, it helps the business. And if I don't bring my A game, it impacts everyone around me. If people can understand that, then that's a hugely beneficial place both for them and the organisation.
Incredible. Thank you so much for that. Nathan Dring, consultant, facilitator, L&D specialist, public speaker, a big believer in the power of conversation, and I think fair to say it's been a really powerful conversation today. Thank you so much, and best of luck with the judging at the UKCXAs as well.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute privilege and a great conversation. Thank you.